Hi. I've been thinking for the last little while what it looks like to integrate AI with my own teaching. Now, I've been testing probably for the last 15 to 18 months with AI, and mostly actually the only thing I have done is write specific bots for my courses, and they're specifically tailored to my classes. So for example, if it's a business ethics class, it will be a business ethics bot. If it's a consultancy course, then it's a consultancy bot. And then if it's a strategy course, then it would be a strategy bot. These are all based on my own slides. They're using my own prompts to go and help students really think through what it's like to do some analysis, to go and generate recommendations, and so forth. What I really want is for students to understand critical thinking and critical analysis. I wasn't really sure how to prompt in a way where it completely guardrails the AI, where the output doesn't allow for copy paste. And I think that to some extent, copy pasting when you don't really understand what is trying to say or what the output means, I see why there's a place and time for that. And then there's like a place and time for when it sort of just doesn't apply. This video isn't really talking about that. It's actually more so thinking through what it's like to integrate fully an AI where you're not using slides to go and lecture, but instead you're digitizing the entire experience. I don't know if it's gonna work out or not. I haven't fully tried this out yet, but this is something that I have been building for the last 2 days. This is an ethics course that I am currently teaching, and the dashboard is a very quick overview to allow students to see where all the moving parts are within the course. I think where there are fundamental gaps, at least how I'm teaching currently, and this is what I see a lot as well within the LMSs. So LMS stands for Learning Management Systems, where if you are working in a higher education system, or maybe you're familiar with online courses, you're using some sort of a system where your entire course exists. As the prof, I'm uploading a series of resources, I'm uploading my class slides, etc. I sometimes see that there's very large gaps in understanding how each prof is doing their own way of systems management, which is completely fair enough. And I think where there may be more gaps is the fact that students aren't able to see how everything connects. I am trying to go and see how a different type of dashboard will help with students understanding how the components all fit. Okay, so preface, this is a business ethics course where they currently are sort of the bigger outcome of the entire course is I'm helping students figure out how to go and create an ethics bot. So each week we go through different types of topics, and each of the topics help them figure out a component they need to communicate. It becomes a guardrail or an instruction that they need to input so that the bot will therefore do whatever it is it has been told it's executing. We are currently in week 6, and this is what I have been building out for the last couple of days. This dashboard was built about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't really quite sure what to do with it. So I thought that this might be a good time to start integrating this specific what we're going to be doing for week 6. So if you're not familiar with something that's called a PRD stands for a product requirement document. This is how I have been building my bots for the last little while. My understanding is that a lot of other people who are familiar with building out different types of products, they also have this type of a document as well. I'm using ChatGPT 5 to test what it would be like to code this interface or this dashboard inside week 6. Here, we are going through stakeholder this week, so students need to understand what stakeholder theory is. And then they need to start taking what they're learning within this lesson and then inputting that into the product requirement document. They have to upload it, and then they have to do a simulation. And this dashboard will tell them what we're going to be doing today, what is the outcome of today's session, and then how this links with the last 5 weeks of the course. And then finally, this is the focus. So these are the checkpoints as to what they need to be doing. This is the lesson. This is actually something that I'm thinking about. I need to go and change this. So this gives some sort of an indication of what is going to be talked about today or this week in the session. Then we go into the learning outcomes. This is actually where usually I go in with a slide deck and I go through all the components with the students before they move into an activity where they're working through a case, and then they're building out the components for the PRD. And instead of having it in blocks of text like this, generally speaking, I would directly go into the session and then I would open with a problem. So I do a lot of problem-based learning and teaching. This is where we kind of set up what the problem is. So instead of saying, well, what is stakeholder theory, or like the scenario is that we are working with a price fixing situation, and students now need to go and identify who these stakeholders are, who has been impacted, how they have been impacted, and what the bot actually can do in order to interface with some of these stakeholders. Depending on the stakeholder, you're going to have to go and do the different types of analysis. And this is where the setup is students need to figure out what to write as a case memo. And then they have to go and have the prompts. The students need to complete this before they come into class, and then this is how I would run the class. So this is the suggestion. All of this, of course, shouldn't be here because that would make no sense if the students was looking at this. But in terms of like where this is supposed to go, you can now see that the students will create these things, meaning that the students are going to go and think through the scenario, so the stakeholders, and they have to start building out a stakeholder map. And then they need to start figuring out what the tensions are, and then they need to go and record the decision. Through there, what they're going to do is they're going to run in and have a simulation. The simulation is something that I have created on the back end. There is a very, very tight prompt where this is a digital twin, and the roles are using Alex Hermosi, Cody Sanchez, and Daniel Priestley, where the student groups are going to go in and they need to go and talk through the decision making with these three leaders. So really it's about figuring out, well, what do I do now? And so they need to go and start off with having a memo, and then they need to go and input their responses. Based on that, then they need to be able to upload this type of information to start building out the next portion of their product requirement. And at some point, the students will have enough information where they are going to be able to go and input this into Copilot. So Copilot is, if you have an enterprise account with Microsoft, this is part of the suite that you will have them as an AI, and let the students actually see how they're learning and like what that progress looks like. What I really like about this is like it actually is much closer to building out a prototype, where a lot of times if you're not coming from this type of a background where you're building, you're experimenting, you're exploring, you don't really know when something will or won't work out. For example, if you're used to doing a lot of case analysis, or you're very used to doing a lot of analysis in general, in business school we do that, then it's quite tricky because you don't really see what happens after you've done this analysis, because there's a really big gap, and that application doesn't really apply until you start working. And I think that is where I'm very interested in learning more about where AI can simulate a closer to reality or closer to application, where students actually see in real time how their decisions may or may not impact outcome. And then they need to be able to go and figure out how to communicate that impact, because as we understand that is where we are now. One of the more interesting things that I was having a conversation with my colleagues yesterday is understanding the competencies. As a business school instructor, I need to figure out the type of competencies that, one, the industry is looking for, and then two, how do I develop these skills in students in order for them to be agile and competitive when they are applying for positions? Hence why I'm trying to figure out a way how to digitize my course where students can see how everything links with each other. But at the same time, I'm still there to go and guide them as to what it looks like to deploy stakeholder theory in a specific case like this. It's not fully hands-on, but I'm moving away from that very traditional method of using or of coming in, lecturing with a slide deck behind me, them directly going into some sort of a case study or a case that they have to work through for that session in that activity. And there isn't really a lot of real life integration or application that allows for students to understand, oh, I see why we're doing this now. I hope you found this to be interesting as I'm working through what this would look like in my own courses. I'll see you at the next one. Bye.